What if the 2026 FIFA World Cup, one of the most lucrative sporting events in history, is about to collapse? What if Donald Trump's tariffs have pushed Canada to the edge of a boycott? And what if $15 billion in sponsorship revenue is now in jeopardy? Because tonight, reports indicate that Canadian officials are actively exploring withdrawal from the tournament as Trump's trade war escalates. This is no longer about soccer. This is about whether political chaos can destroy a global economic event. And the damage is already spreading. The FIFA World Cup was supposed to unite North America. Instead, it may become the most expensive casualty of Trump's pressure campaign. According to multiple reports, Canadian government officials and business leaders are now discussing the possibility of boycotting FIFA 2026 if Trump's tariffs remain in place. The tournament is scheduled to be co-hosted by the United States, Canada, and Mexico. Canada is set to host matches in Vancouver and Toronto. But if those cities withdraw, the entire structure of the tournament becomes unstable. This is not rhetoric. This is operational planning. The World Cup represents more than athletic competition. It represents infrastructure investment, tourism revenue, and global sponsorship agreements worth billions. FIFA has already signed contracts with major corporate sponsors including Adidas, Coca-Cola, Visa, and Hyundai. Those contracts assume the tournament will proceed as planned across all three host nations. If Canada withdraws, sponsors do not pay for uncertainty. A fractured tournament means financial commitments evaporate. Industry analysts estimate that a Canadian boycott could trigger sponsor withdrawals worth up to $15 billion. That figure reflects the combined value of broadcasting rights, hospitality packages, and corporate partnerships tied to the North American market. Canada's participation is essential. Canadian cities were selected to expand the tournament's geographic and commercial reach. Removing them undermines the entire value proposition FIFA sold to sponsors. Let's examine the timeline. Trump imposed sweeping tariffs on Canadian steel, aluminum, and manufactured goods, disrupting cross-border supply chains. Canadian officials responded with counter-tariffs. Then Trump expanded tariffs to consumer goods, including items related to sports infrastructure. Construction materials, stadium equipment, and hospitality supplies all face higher costs. Canadian organizers are now calculating whether hosting World Cup matches under these conditions remains economically viable. The sequence matters. Tariffs were imposed. Costs surged. Canadian officials began internal discussions about withdrawal. Those discussions leaked to media. Sponsors expressed concern. FIFA officials scrambled to contain the damage. This is not a sudden crisis. This is a foreseeable consequence of sustained economic pressure. Trump created the conditions. Canada is responding to those conditions. And the World Cup is caught in the middle. Now consider the structural motivation. Why would Canada consider boycotting the World Cup? Because the financial equation no longer works. Hosting requires massive public investment. Cities must upgrade stadiums, expand transportation networks, and increase security infrastructure. That investment is justified by expected returns. Tourism spending, global media exposure, long-term economic benefits. But if tariffs raise costs and reduce cross-border attendance, those returns diminish. Canadian taxpayers would be funding a tournament that benefits the United States while Trump undermines Canadian economic interests. This is where the political calculation becomes unavoidable. Mark Carney has consistently emphasized fiscal discipline and strategic leverage. A World Cup boycott would be fiscally responsible if hosting costs exceed benefits. It would also be strategically powerful. It would demonstrate that Canada will not subsidize American events while enduring American economic aggression. That message resonates domestically. It signals strength, not weakness. It shows that Canada prioritizes its own interests over accommodating Trump's chaos. Trump has framed his tariffs as defending American workers. But how does collapsing a World Cup hosted on American soil defend American workers? The tournament is expected to generate billions in U.S. economic activity. Hotels, restaurants, transportation services, and retail businesses across American host cities depend on that revenue. If Canada withdraws and sponsors pull funding, American workers lose jobs. American businesses lose income. American cities lose investment. Trump's tariffs would have directly caused that outcome. If you value serious analysis of how politics shapes global economics, subscribe to Canada Today. We track power, consequences, and accountability. Because sometimes the biggest stories are not about what leaders say. They are about what they cost. Institutional response is already emerging. FIFA officials have reportedly engaged in urgent consultations with Canadian organizers. The message from FIFA is clear. The tournament cannot proceed as planned without Canadian participation. But FIFA has limited leverage. It cannot force Canada to host. It cannot override Canadian fiscal priorities. And it cannot shield the tournament from the consequences of Trump's trade policy. Sponsors are not waiting for FIFA to resolve this. Corporate partners are already conducting risk assessments and evaluating contingency clauses. Some have reportedly communicated directly with FIFA, expressing concern about brand reputation if the event becomes associated with political instability. Sponsors want safe, predictable, globally celebrated events. A boycotted or diminished World Cup fails that test. Business analysts have been blunt. If Canada withdraws, the tournament loses credibility. If credibility falls, viewership projections decline. If viewership declines, advertising rates drop. If advertising rates drop, revenue falls short of projections. And if revenue falls short, FIFA faces financial penalties and sponsors demand compensation. This is not abstract. This is contractual liability. Trump's tariffs may have just created a multi-billion-dollar legal and financial crisis for one of the world's most valuable sporting events. Republican lawmakers in border states are notably silent. They understand the economic stakes. World Cup matches represent jobs, tourism, and global visibility. But defending the tournament means opposing Trump's tariffs. So they remain quiet. That silence signals discomfort. If the World Cup collapses and their constituents lose revenue, that silence will become a liability. Even conservative commentators have begun questioning the wisdom of tariffs that jeopardize major economic events. They are not defending Canada. They are defending American business interests. But the result is the same. Trump's policy is facing criticism from voices that would normally support him. That criticism is not loud yet, but it is present, and it is growing. This is where Trump's strategy unravels. He imposed tariffs to project strength. But those tariffs are now threatening an event that benefits the United States. He claimed to defend American workers, but his actions may cost American workers billions. He promised to make America stronger, but he may have just made America the reason a global event collapses. That is not strength. That is self-inflicted damage. Mark Carney does not need to escalate. He does not need to threaten. He simply needs to allow the economic logic to unfold. If hosting the World Cup under Trump's tariff regime is not financially viable, Canada withdraws. If Canada withdraws, sponsors react. If sponsors react, FIFA pressures the United States. If FIFA pressures the United States, American cities and businesses pressure Trump. Carney set none of that in motion. Trump did. Carney is simply refusing to absorb the cost. This is strategic patience. Trump thrives on confrontation. Carney thrives on accountability. Trump creates pressure. Carney lets institutions process that pressure. Trump demands immediate reactions. Carney builds long-term leverage. The contrast is devastating because while Trump appears impulsive and reactive, Carney appears measured and responsible. And in a crisis involving billions of dollars and global reputation, measured responsibility wins. Canada now has several options. First, it can continue preparing while publicly documenting the financial burden imposed by tariffs. Second, it can negotiate directly with FIFA for compensation if hosting costs exceed projections. Third, it can coordinate with Mexican officials to present a unified front. And fourth, it can allow American business groups and sponsors to lobby Trump directly, keeping Canadian hands clean. That is political efficiency. Each of those options strengthens Canada's position. None of them require drama. None of them require threats. They simply require discipline and patience. And that is exactly what Carney has demonstrated throughout this conflict. Trump attempted to use tariffs as leverage. Instead, he may have triggered a sporting and financial disaster. He attempted to pressure Canada. Instead, he created conditions for Canada to hold leverage over a global event. He attempted to project dominance. Instead, he looks reckless. The World Cup was supposed to showcase North American unity and economic strength. Now it may showcase political dysfunction and strategic failure. And the responsibility for that outcome lies with Trump. If records show that Canadian withdrawal was caused by tariffs, this will not be a policy debate. It will be a case study in how impulsive governance destroys value. $15 billion in sponsorships, billions more in tourism and infrastructure investment, jobs across 3 nations, global credibility. All of it at risk because Trump could not manage trade relations with America's closest ally. Donald Trump wanted to be tough. Instead, he may have just crashed the World Cup. He wanted to protect American interests. Instead, he endangered them. He wanted to show strength. Instead, he revealed recklessness. The FIFA World Cup was supposed to be a celebration. Now it may become evidence of failure. If you value accountability and strategic analysis, subscribe to Canada Today. We cut through political theater and focus on consequences. Because sometimes the real story is not what leaders threaten. It is what they destroy.